you. Okay, well, welcome everybody to the Norton Planning Board's meeting of April the 23rd. I would ask that anybody joining remotely, if you could please mute your microphone while you're not speaking. So, as I mentioned, this is the Planning Board's meeting of Tuesday, April 23rd. Members of the public are welcome to participate in person and remotely. In person, we are at the Norton Public Library at 68 East Main Street. Join on via Zoom. You can use the Zoom ID 638-929-1060. There's also a phone number to dial in directly if needed. The meeting will also be available on Norton Cable Access, Channel 15, Channel 9, and viewable on the Norton Media Center's YouTube channel after the meeting. For future sessions, please feel free to email questions for the board ahead of the meeting to Brian Carmichael, town staff, and they can be read into the record as needed in case you are not able to attend in person or virtually. So with that out of the way, thank you very much everybody for joining us. I'll start off the meeting with again, an in-person welcome to Paul D. Giuseppe, who has rejoined Norton as our town planner. Paul, great to have you back with us.
Great to be back.
Okay. And I know I think we speak for all of us when we are very, very glad that you're here. I'll say it again. I'll probably continue to say it. So.
See how you are in a year.
Okay.
I'm very happy to be back.
In terms of planning board business and policies, we do have, I think, one item that we can address at the end of the meeting, so I'll save that for now. We don't have any bills or warrants. We do have 2 sets of minutes that were sent around for us to review and approve. I'll also hold those to the end unless anybody has any objection. So just to restate, we have 2 items on our agenda this evening. Beyond those items, we have a continuation of a public hearing for 0 Mansfield Avenue. And then we have a discussion regarding a citizen's petition for town meeting regarding a lighting bylaw for Norton. In terms of trying to do what we can to make sure that nobody's waiting here forever, my initial thought process in terms of how we would proceed would be to proceed with continuation of our discussion for 0 Mansfield Avenue. Hear everybody who would like to speak on that, run through any questions that we may have for the applicants, any issues where we want to make sure that we're addressing any comments, and then close the public hearing, hear the discussion about the citizen's petition, and then move forward with the decision for 0 Mansfield. It's a little bit back and forth. The other option is to do everything for 0 Mansfield first and do the lighting bylaw second. If anybody has a objection to bouncing back and forth a little bit, just to make sure that we don't keep the citizen's petition waiting, let me know. I know I went back and forth on it myself, so.
No, I'm okay with it if everybody else is. Gives us a moment to dwell on a decision, I guess.
Okay. With that out of the way, we'll proceed to a continuation of the public hearing for site plan review 20100, 20103, and special permit 19928 and 19935 for 0 Mansfield Avenue. And we have Mr. Jacoby here with us, so thank you very much, sir.
Good to be here again. Good to see Mr. Giuseppe again. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Jack Jacoby, 144 Bank Street, Attleboro, representing the applicant. So I want to make sure I understand what you just said about our procedure. So I have a brief update. We also have the updated landscaping and lighting plans that were filed. I assume you will want Dan Campbell to present those. Then my question is, when we finish that, would you want to then take public input before we do a summation? And after that public input, we can sum, and anybody in the public can sum who's opposed? Would that be the procedure?
Generally, yes. And the board has also been tracking a list of the waivers you requested and different issues that could come up. So we would run through those prior to closing the public hearing, just to make sure there's anything needing clarification from you before we do so.
Okay, great. So my brief update is that we filed the lighting plans and the landscaping plans as you asked, and removed the legend that they would be further updated at the time of the building permit. And in addition, I'm pleased to report that last night the Conservation Commission voted unanimously to approve an order of conditions for both parcels C and D. And with that, I think it's time for Dan to come up, and perhaps if either Paul or Brian can bring up the plan, but we also do have it in hard copy, depending on how we want to proceed.
Third from the last page. Will give us lighting and then landscape. The one before that is lighting. Perfect. Good evening, Daniel Campbell, Level Design Group, on behalf of the applicant. What we have to run through is the photometric plans for the site. Basically, there's zero exfiltration of light and foot candles off the site, with the exception of right along the frontage along Mansfield Ave. We have 0.01, 0.02, which is a very small amount of light, but made sense with the sidewalk that we're proposing along the front of the site as well. So it does go over the property line, but it doesn't go over the sidewalk. They are dark sky compliant LED fixtures, which are shown on the next page. And the idea of the fixtures, they are more of a residential in nature. They are shorter fixtures along the buildings, taller fixtures in the parking lot. We are 16 feet in the parking lot. For the fixture height, we are between 8 and 10 feet along the buildings for the walkways. And we have no lighting behind the buildings that isn't from the building itself, because we have the wetlands and everything else behind the structure. The very last page is the updated landscaping plan. And the landscaping has been updated in a similar nature to what was originally submitted. We have extensive landscaping immediately in front of the buildings and to the side of the building, sort of on the approach. We have landscaping directly behind and around the basins, but those are larger trees to complement the wooded area behind. And then we've asked Mass Highway to allow us, in between the sidewalk and the site, to plant, again, some larger deciduous trees. The idea being that they will grow in that area. They're behind where the existing electric lines are, so we feel like they should be able to survive. Those lines are also a little bit taller. These are a little bit of a shorter deciduous tree. So we think that those will be work well with the site as a whole. We did the same thing for Lot D. Lot D's lighting plan uses the same fixtures, same styles, has approximately the same amount of light that comes off. The landscaping plan looks similar, but I'd be happy to go through it with you. It is, similarly, we're planting in the front of the structure. We're planting around the central portion, leaving the central portion large grass area for not only the detention basin, but as we explained before, so that there was a play area, someplace that people could set up for cornhole or barbecue or things of that nature. So around the approach side in both directions on this building, there's landscaping that wraps the edges. We have a couple of larger trees to complement the slopes, and then we've planted along the frontage to make it a more residential feel, as we talked about. So I think we answered the site-related questions that we left with last time, but I'm happy to answer any remaining drainage, site, layout, landscaping, or lighting questions.
Thank you. And just before I go to that, I do see one person with their hand raised in the Zoom meeting. I'm going to ask the applicant to go through their initial presentation and answer some questions, and then I will go to public comment. So I see you, and I'll recognize you in the near future, in a short while. Thank you. So, from members of the board, additional questions for Mr. Campbell based on the landscaping, lighting plans, or other site questions that he can answer for us at this point?
We had as a pending item, the fire department's review of access and clearance, both with and without snow storage, but I don't see any resolution to that.
In terms of,
Mr. Jacoby was going to agree that LVG would get, fire sign off prior to this meeting.
okay,
So the paperwork was submitted. We have had no response to the plans as a whole, because they're not in front of them for a building permit, so I don't know, I can't make the fire department or anybody else respond back to us. I can only submit the documentation, which was done before we started the original meeting as well.
yes.
I did speak with Deputy Chief Robbins earlier today. I asked him the question about the access, the fire access to the buildings, and he did verbally say they didn't have issues with that. We didn't talk about the snow issue,
Sure.
removal issue, but he was okay with the access.
Thank you.
From what I recall, snow storage is going to be in the middle, correct? Is that?
Snow storage is primarily in the middle and the very far ends. So if I can walk up to the screen.
Yeah,
The center snow storage is primarily to the right of the dumpster here, but that still leaves us 25 feet of lawn area between the landscaping and where we're intending to pile it, at least on, the smaller storm events. And then we'll be pushing it to the ends of the parking lot. There's 4 or 5 spaces at the very end of Lot C, for instance, that, assuming they're not being used, would be used for snow storage. If not, it would be right adjacent to that, which has grassed areas and swales for treatment and discharge.
those 3 on the left there.
Correct.
Thank you, Brian. Okay. Additional site questions? Laura?
Do we have to show where the hookup for the electric vehicle is intended to be? I know they're gonna just, what the term is, pre-wire or,
Yeah, so the electric department really depends, they determine where is the best place for us to feed from.
okay,
Sometimes it's from the transformer, sometimes they want us to feed from the building,
okay,
but we will have the requisite pre-wired spaces according to the building code.
okay. And you'll work on that once the construction started, you know where the electrical and all that's going to be?
Right, once we have permits, then we can go to the electric department and we can ask those questions.
Got it, thank you.
Not a mind reader, but I'm guessing the ones closest to the buildings.
Probably.
They're probably gonna be the ones closest to the edge of the dumpster pad, in all honesty, because that's where our transformer is.
I have a question. Behind the proposed recreation area,
Yep.
what is the drop-off?
The drop-off varies across the backside of the site. If we can probably go to the grading utilities, which will be the 5th sheet in the overall plan set, I believe. Yeah, that'll work. So as you can see across the backside of that, it varies. The only drop-off point is where we are with the wall right here, and that height is around 6 to 7 feet. But the remainder of it is graded to some degree, and it's a 3-to-1 slope, so it's not inextensive, it's not steep, it's not riprap, it's grassed as well. But the area in here is a fairly sizable area. As you can see, it's at least the depth of the building itself.
Okay. Thank you.
And I know previously you'd said that that fence would be marked and there would be additional signage telling people, these are wetlands, don't go in there.
So the
In fancier terms than that.
conservation requires us to put up their placards The only condition that we garnered last night over and above that was they're also asking us to place a placard that says no dumping, basically so the landscapers don't throw clippings and stuff over the edge.
Additional site-related questions or additional questions as a whole for the applicant prior to us going to public comment? Alan, I'm gonna go to, just ask you directly if you have anything at this point that you wanted to raise.
Just want to know if the applicant wanted to address the affordable housing that we brought up last week. Any update, any other comment, anything?
Our position remains that the bylaw says what it says, but I understand your position that you've been advised by town council. And so I suspect that you will probably take the advice of your attorney. And if you should issue this permit, you probably will have a condition. What we would do about that, I can't say at this point. I have to say that it was interesting from the first opinion to the second opinion, how things changed. And frankly, I thought she tied herself up into a pretzel to try and reach a conclusion, but that was just my opinion. And so I think that in the end, as she said to you in the first opinion, you are the initial judge of what your bylaw means, and we then have to deal with that.
Thank you. And I think
Paul, do you remember this coming up before, an applicant having a problem or us having a discussion on how that bylaw was interpreted?
No, not during my time.
I expect that when we, after we close the public hearing, that it makes sense to pull the bylaw up on screen, and we're all gonna look at it and look at town council's statements, and we'll make a determination about it. Anything further from anybody prior to going to public comment here? Okay. Hearing none, I'm gonna try and go back and forth between anybody who's looking to speak in the Zoom meeting, anybody here in person. I do see that there's somebody in the Zoom meeting who's had their virtual hand raised for a while. So the name that I see in the Zoom meeting is Jane. If you would like to unmute and just state your name and address for the record, please. I'm looking forward to hearing your comments. I do see you as still muted. I can't see you on camera. I'm not quite sure if that's the mute button playing tricks on you. But I will give you stand here and ramble for a second to give you a chance. Otherwise, I will circle back to you later in the meeting to see if you are able to rejoin. Okay. I will come back to you, Jane, in a little short while. Is there anybody here in person who would like to speak further? Yes, please. Just come to the podium, please.
Deidre Braga, 19 Reservoir Street. I'm sorry I missed the last couple of meetings, so I don't know if this has come up. I think I had asked a couple of months ago when I was here if they've done the traffic study.
Yes.
We still don't know with the traffic that's happening at the McDonald's, that has not been filled yet, so I don't think a true traffic study can even be done yet, as well as the ones that are on Pine Street that are being built. So I'd like to hear what that's gonna be done, because right now, I am 4 or 5 houses off a Reservoir, and to get out in the morning and to come home, it's past Mass Gas. So there's additional traffic that I think needs to be taken into consideration.
Yes. So the applicant did,
Okay.
the applicant did perform a traffic study, and those are all driven by the Institute of Traffic Engineers and all of their data and calculations about, for a multifamily property this size, it'll generate this many trips on average, this many during the peak hours, et cetera. All of the numbers that they ran, they also included Pine Street, the building McDonald's, and some other developments that are in town. So all of those even though that's not completed, the numbers of that pending
Pending.
was already included in the study that they did for us.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, it was peer reviewed by the peer reviewer that the town hired, who confirmed that our figures were accurate and there was no adverse impact expected from the development.
Thank you.
If I could just offer, there will be a condition to employ Department of Transportation to optimize the traffic signals.
Yes, yes, part of the applicant's presentation is that they
Yeah,
did the
thank you.
traffic study and that they would have recommendations for Mass DOT to
Improve
refine the
level of
timing of
service.
the lights at at Norton's, at 140 and 123 to potentially improve the level of service there, and that's something that Mass DOT is always happy to welcome in private people to do their work for them.
Well said.
Yes.
We meet again. I'm John Shea, 25 Reservoir Street. I apologize to my parents, I just came from work. To the board, thank you. This is a fruitless job and aggravating. I want to go back a little bit. This is going to be a little bit of time consuming. This lot started with 11 houses.
I believe it started with single-family lots, yes.
What happened to that?
The owner decided to change what they wanted to do.
Did they have to come in front of the planning board for the houses?
I believe they came in front of the planning board to divide up the lots. That's just a division of lot lines. It's not, we would just say, instead of one big lot, you have 4 little ones.
Correct.
That's,
So that passed the planning board.
it went through the planning board, I believe, through an A&R an approval not required process, which basically, the board looks at it from a, do all these lots have frontage? Do all these lots meet the size requirements? If yes, then we are expected to endorse it.
Okay.
In fact, if we don't take any action on it, the state considers it approved without us doing anything.
Thank you for that answer, because we're on a fact-finding mission here, because I'm trying to learn about this as we go on, so good. So, we all agreed that houses were good there.
All we did was divide up the lot lines with nothing on it.
Right, but the assumption is, unless I just misunderstood you, nothing was taken further, so it would be approved because of the breakup and stuff like that. There wouldn't have been any challenge to it or anything like that, basically. We wouldn't be having these meetings, we wouldn't have these
Those would
traffic
generally,
studies. and
those
stuff.
would generally be as-of-right developments, whether some of them would need conservation with wetlands or who knows what.
Individual to each house that's being built.
There are a number of uses that they could do as of right.
Okay.
Single-family housing being one of them, other ones could, I think,
Village commercial.
yeah, top of it, it's a village commercial, so
That's
there's
where I'm
all
going.
number of things
Dover
that could be
amendments.
as of right.
Yeah.
A school, a church.
Yep, okay, so that's where I'm going next with this. So, were these the gentlemen that wanted the 11 houses? Or do we know? Do you know? Are we allowed to answer?
I mean, all they proposed was different lots.
Okay.
They did not propose houses specifically.
Okay, all right. So, now we move forward into this apartment complex. We spoke before, I was on the Zoom meeting. What does the planning board have for latitude in planning? Now, we discussed before, you said you're not allowed to take the financial impact into this. No.
There
No,
are
you agree
elements
with
of-
you, yes?
There are elements of the financial impact that we're not allowed to consider,
Okay.
which we've gone through in other
Right.
sessions.
Okay. So are you allowed to, within the financial impact, like, that would include the school impact, you're not allowed to look at that? I'm asking, I don't know. I'm not trying to get you in trouble, I'm trying
Yeah.
to figure this out, because, I mean, what my next.
I hate to go through the laundry list. There's of what we can or can't, there's a number of things that we look at.
Yeah,
Ultimately, they are in front of us for a discretionary special permit,
yeah,
asking for us to give them relief from the town's bylaws according to what they've requested.
right,
What they've requested is multifamily in this district they need a special permit.
Mhm.
We can say no for a number of reasons, whether we think it's too much density, whether we think it's also too much traffic impact. The bylaws have a core set of conditions where one of the basic ones is the detrimental impact, the positive impacts outweigh the detrimental impacts, or something like that, kind of a balancing test
Gotcha.
for the board to weigh in their own judgment.
All right. Now, at the end of this, each member votes.
Correct.
Are they guided by their belief and opinion, or are they guided by legalese, rules and regulations, like they have to say yes to? Because let me circle
For a
back to.
discretionary special permit, we are guided by those conditions. So one of those is being that balancing test of do the positives outweigh the negatives.
To law or to your opinion?
Everybody has their different, places a different amount of weight on every aspect of the project.
Okay. Because what I want to understand is this town went through a huge study, sat there, I didn't mean to strike a nerve, I just,
No, you're good.
don't play poker. They went
I've
through a
heard
huge,
that.
they went through a huge study to undertake and change 140. I'm gonna plead a little bit of ignorance, I sat there and watched it go by and believed what everybody else wanted, because I didn't truly understand law. As you get older, you get wiser to it, understand commercial village, some of the lots are set back, some of them not so bad. So if the whole town voted for commercial village along that way, which was a town meeting, 200, 300, 400 people, I'm not trying to be exact, I'm not trying to guide people with misinformation either, but that was a pretty big meeting. Are any developers allowed to come and just fulfill the planning board's, I use wishes very loosely, wishes, regulations, rules, and then they get their permit?
If I
If an owner had, let's say, if you own property in Norton,
Mhm.
you can do whatever you want on your property that's an as-of-right use.
Mhm.
If you wanna do something that you need to get a variance from the ZBA, you go to the ZBA.
Right,
If you don't need a variance, you can do whatever you want.
right.
Any owner can do any as-of-right use that they want on their property. The applicant has proposed this. They could have proposed a different item. This is what they proposed, and this is what we look at.
Which isn't according to what is there.
It's not an as-of-right use. It's a special permit. It's a use that is permitted by special permit. So if you want to propose this here, it's going to have to go through the special permit process, which means you go through all these hearings,
Mhm.
and to get the permit, you need a supermajority of the board, which is 5 out of 7 members.
Tim, could I address something?
Yeah,
Sure.
Again, to go to like, any property owner can choose whatever option is on the table within their zoning district.
Mhm.
And the town decided that within the village commercial district, where this property particularly is, multifamilies are sometimes allowed. So the town decided that within that district, sometimes multifamilies, it shouldn't be allowed by right.
so, just so I understand this, and thank you. In the commercial village approval at that town meeting, they allowed a special permit to build apartments in there?
Well, depending on which, if we're talking about
Multifamily's
our,
anything more than
there's
3, I think.
two different districts that might be getting mixed up here. We have village commercial that runs up and down 140 and 123.
Correct.
But in our center, which like 2 or 3 years ago, we just passed Village Center Core,
Mm-hmm,
which is basically like a sort of smaller, hyper-commercialized district.
mm-hmm.
Um,
Is this lot in that zone or no?
No,
Okay, so that wouldn't apply to this?
so this is just in village commercial itself.
Correct.
Yeah, and as Tim said, any allowed by right use,
Yeah,
they don't have to come through us for a special permit, they just gotta get the building approved.
I
But-
fully understand
But
that
for
so
special
far.
approval means that within that district, as a planning board, we do have a little bit of leeway, but we should not necessarily outright deny. We don't have, some of those things should be in there. The district might need a ratio. Maybe the village commercial should be 10% multifamily or 20 or 40. That's not labeled, but it's not supposed to be majority multifamily,
Mhm.
but it should be a part of that district. It's kind of what the suggestion is from the zoning district itself. Like, there's no factories allowed, so we wouldn't allow it. It's no special permit option to put a factory there.
Mhm.
So like, that's the difference in zoning. If we want to create a village commercial neighborhood
Mhm.
that doesn't allow multifamilies,
Yeah,
where just only single-family homes and small shops, we have to create a new district or change the district that exists right now to exclude multifamily as a special permit.
Change that SP into a no, basically would be the.
All right, this I remember, yeah, all
So,
right, cool.
yeah, to answer your question, yes, village commercial allows multifamily by special permit, and that's what we voted
Okay,
on.
thank you.
Top of the shop housing is what's done by right, as if used right.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Okay, so that makes a lot more sense, so then that answers a bunch of the next questions and stuff like that. So now, let me ask you this final question. What is the weight of the local people there versus the contractor? 0, some, 50%, 75%, 100%?
I think that everybody weighs each public comment individually,
Mhm.
and how all of that factors into that, I'm gonna call it a, see, so obviously if we have 50 people lining up telling us that we think this is a terrible idea,
Mhm.
we've had a lot of people at this, for this project saying, not sure I like this.
Mhm.
I'm worried about the traffic, I'm worried about this. We take all of that in, we listen to what the applicant has to say about them,
Mhm.
and we have to make a decision.
And you'll note the applicant can also make modifications to their plans as well, in which case they did here.
They have. I've stated before, I've stated again, they're very affordable, accommodating. They've listened to the people's complaints, made their moves. I don't understand.
That's not
why
always the
From 3
case.
buildings to 2 buildings, but that was something, you know, whatever they had there, they just withdrew that plan there. You know, and builders tend to do that, but let me ask you a question. Remember when they built the buildings and the offices on Birch Street over there? Was anybody on the board then? Did anybody go to the town, those meetings then? They talked about,
Oh, you're talking about
not Birch
Conrad?
Street, I apologize.
Leonard Street.
Leonard
Conrad.
Street, where the where the driving range used to be.
Yes.
Yes.
That. Weren't there supposed to be 220 apartments built in that?
There was originally potentially going to be a 40B property,
Right.
and the town chose to rezone that to industrial to pursue what's a version of what's there now.
Okay, all right, that makes some sense then.
All of those, each one of those properties has gone through the special permit process,
Okay.
because they trigger it for various reasons. They're too big, or they're different things that made them hit the special permit thresholds.
Nothing about the schools, though, just the fact that they didn't want the load of people in that area. So that's why they rezoned it to industrial?
Industrial is generally a higher tax revenue for the town.
Okay.
Um,
Well, yeah,
And it
there's
also
nobody, there's no
gives the
kids, there's
town-
nobody living in it, it's just commercial base, it's business
And-
being done.
And 40Bs, when the town is not above the state's affordable housing threshold percentages,
Yeah,
the permitting process essentially is very streamlined in favor of the developer.
gotcha.
So if you're not at the threshold, 40B can kind of, if they can do mostly what they want.
But point to be that, I can understand that, I remember that conversation, and they were being very amenable to the town, wanted to do things, so we didn't get strangled by the 40B question. All right, a couple more questions, I apologize for eating up your time. Is the town allowed to study the impacts? Now, I don't know if it's positive or less, so I say this with an open mind, of what the values of the properties become when you build an apartment beside it? Are you allowed to look at those? Are you allowed to see what happens there, or no?
I would say we generally think about it. It is something that we've gone into this in detail with some other projects.
Mhm.
But impact on property values in adjacent properties is something that we think about when we're looking at a project. In
Now,
terms
you
of.
think about it, but are we allowed to have a study on it? Is the board allowed to direct them to make a study of it? Are we, I mean, that's what I'm asking, like,
The challenge becomes, how do you do a like-to-like?
well, I don't know,
What do you-
I
what
don't
do
do
you-
studies.
No, but how do you do you get into hey, we found the study, well, we won't like it, it was in Maryland. Hey, we found this study, well, the apartment building was bigger.
Well, I'm a simpleton, I mean, you would think that you would find an apartment beside a house and see if it goes up or down. Now, like
But-
Red Mill Village, I'm assuming it raised them, and that's not to be disrespectful to these gentlemen of what they're presenting. I mean, because that village up behind Kelly's place is, I guess, I've read before, it's like in one of the top ones in the country, or something like that, like it's reputable, it's very well. I mean, the apartment houses beside them, great people, you see them out there doing everything and stuff like that. So it's not like I'm against it, but like, you sit here as a whole, you know, I drive by there for the last 25 years. You look at the woods, and I've looked at their renditions, and, you know, you sit there driving on the road, and you go, is that gonna be good or bad? I mean, trees are trees, we've all looked at trees. Their renditions look nice, but everything else that comes with it and stuff like that, you know, I don't know if that's right or wrong, if that bears on your minds and stuff like that. I'll leave you with this parting shot. The people on Reservoir Street, the others that live around there, I think we all have spoken loud and clear that we're against it. Not them, the people, the apartments, just for the whole principle of the project. But are you aware that one resident already up and left because of this? Do you think it's wise that a elderly woman sold her house because she was so distraught about it? And from what I'm pretty sure about, she was a lifelong resident of Norton. I mean, does that wear on your mind or anything like that at all?
It does.
Okay.
We do hear things like that from time to time,
Mhm.
yeah.
I mean, the house sold, so the next person comes in, but I feel bad for them when they wake up in 4 months because they're brand new and go, what the heck is that? You know what I mean? And we all know, that's why I say thank you to you all, because Steve, you got a question?
I got another comment. I mean, to reflect on that.
Yeah,
I've lived in town my entire life, and when I was a kid,
yeah,
the end of Reservoir Street was a tunnel of trees.
yeah,
The residents there that don't want something built there weren't there when I was a kid either,
right,
and I used to play in those woods.
yeah,
So yes, I definitely reflect on that stuff. Red Mill Village used to be a gravel pit where I rode my dirt bike.
yeah.
The development, the apartments next to it used to be my friend's house. I used to hang out and have parties there.
Well, I'm guilty, I'm not
Like,
a
so-
hypocrite, I'm guilty. My house, I moved in my first house in 93. Jim and Priscilla Devine, 31 Reservoir Street. Great people.
So
And then,
it's,
oh, look at, they're building houses here. So, I mean, I played and went in those woods. I mean, I get how progression in life goes and stuff like that, but it's, you know, as this is all gone and these gentlemen pass their way, and 10 years down the road, when you're all off the planning board and, you know, you're much grayer because you had to deal with all this and stuff like that, myself included. I mean, I mean this sincerely, thank you for your service and stuff like that, and listening to us and everything, but, I'll leave you to do with that, but thank you very much, you answered a lot of questions.
if I can make one more
Yeah.
before we get.
Please.
The main part of this, I suppose, is if we don't allow a multifamily or whatever use as a special permit,
Mhm.
the applicant can then change their mind and build any other use that's within that district.
Totally, yeah.
So I would recommend that any residents that feel like something shouldn't be in a district,
Mhm.
really take an in-depth look at our table and figure out what else can be built within that, and then apply for town meeting articles to change that.
I know what you're talking about there. Yeah, because that goes back to when they created this whole list and stuff. Because this whole list came from, we had nothing, if I remember correctly, right? This whole list and this commercial village and everything was created over the last few years.
The Village Center core was created.
Yeah,
The Village Commercial has been around for a while.
okay, all right. But I know that, and I'm learning on those things and stuff. Like that.
No worries.
All right, cool. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. I'll
Jane's
say,
off mute.
yep, I'll say, Jane in the Zoom meeting, if you'd like to speak. Please just state your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, Jane Rotundi, 17 Reservoir Street.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And enjoying technical difficulties over here.
No worries.
My first question is, looking at tonight's agenda, and I am not trying to be argumentative, it's just an information. Why is this conversation continuing if it's posted on our public agenda that the discussion is supposed to be 3 proposed buildings, and I'm not quoting the entire agenda, which I have pulled up in front of me, for 24-unit apartment buildings, yet I've already enjoyed a screen share which shares a 36-unit building. Why is the conversation allowed to continue? Because
Sure.
it's not on the agenda.
Sure. So this project was originally 3 different apartment buildings, and in the course of it being a noticed public hearing, the applicant has removed one of the buildings and adjusted some of the other dimensions. But the underlying permit numbers, et cetera, are the same.
I understand that, I believe, but an agenda, as I understand, and I consulted with a few other people in town, including the town clerk, and I can name other people if you would like me to, why is a conversation happening about a 36-unit building, which is not at all clear on this public agenda.
I would say, I would restate my original statement, that this public hearing has been noticed, has been discussed a number of times over the past several months, and has been continued as an open public hearing for members of the public to join and to raise comments. If you, as a resident, as an abutter, if you would like to file an appeal based on this process, you are certainly welcome to.
Okay, thank you, because I've been attending most of them for over a year. My second concern, which I would like the board to, it's probably already been said, but I need to reiterate it. And I understand that these were woods here when we chose to buy the piece of land and have our home built. All the homes that were built here, the 10, I don't know who's counting, what view you see on Reservoir, there's 8 and 2 behind, but the 8 out in front, none of them were built with sump pumps. Almost all of them at this point have sump pumps and a serious water issue. I do not have all my agenda meetings in front of me, but 2 or 3 meetings ago, as I understood, it's up to the homeowner to now prove that the water runoff, which would damage my home at least more, and then file a civil suit. And I'd like the planning board to please consider that. They're raising the property right now across from me, which is level, at least 10 feet higher, and they're going to collect water closer to our home. So I ask you to take that into consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening, and thank you for your volunteer work.
Thank you very much.
And I'd ask you to vote no on this project. Thank you.
Thank you. And if I could just ask you to lower your hand in the Zoom meeting when Zoom decides to agree with you, that'll save the ADD part of my brain from thinking you'd like to comment again. And if you would like to comment again, please feel free. Ms. Senior?
Hello, Cheryl Senior, 169 Reservoir Street. I've lived on Reservoir Street for over 2 decades, walked it, biked it. I'm familiar with the bylaws, I've looked at the studies, I've looked at the documents the town has prepared. This development is too dense for these parcels, it's too dense for this section of Route 140, it's too dense for the Norton Grove. It's already one of, if not the most densely developed neighborhoods we have in Norton. We have the reservoir there. It doesn't make sense. And as far as the village commercial goes, a single apartment building would have met the intent of that. 2 is not necessary. Just because the zoning bylaw, that you can find a way to let them get the most return on investment out of it, doesn't mean that's the way the town should go. Right? You can get more money for property values, but you're paying it out in the other end as well. And I can't imagine that this isn't gonna create not just more of a headache, but more of the brunt of it is gonna fall on this particular neighborhood. There's no equity in that. So there's a lot of things that should have gone into this sooner. And I hope that if this passes the way it is, that you will consider all these things when more development proposals come to you.
Thank you. I'll ask if there's any other people here who would like to comment.
I have one more question, actually.
Sure, please. And I'll ask you to state your name and address once again, just in case we missed it the first
Gladly.
time.
John Shea, 25 Reservoir Street. Could I have the gentleman, either one of them, to come up and explain the building plan? In the beginning, there's supposed to be 3 buildings, 10,000 square feet, 24 per. We do math, that's 400 square feet per apartment, right?
I lost the numbers there as you went through them quickly. I believe they did.
Because
Give
what I'm
us
looking at, he said he was gonna, I apologize. he said he was gonna talk about 1, 2, and 3-bedroom apartments in these buildings. How do you get 2 and 3-bedroom apartments and still keep the 24, which is now 60? We're going for 60, correct? How do we get,
I'll ask them to just come up.
yeah, perfect. Do we have plans on that we can look at yet or not?
There's not interior layout plans in
Okay.
terms of how much square foot per apartment. I'll ask them just to give an overview of the buildings and rough average size of the
Thank
units
you
if
for
that was-
that. The question I have for you is, how come they haven't produced an interior plan yet? They got outside water, sewer,
Because
light,
it's not
trees.
required as this part of the process.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Yep.
Thanks.
Yes.
Do you want me to reintroduce myself too?
Sure.
Daniel Campbell, Level Design Group for the applicant. Brian, can we go to the layout sheet, one sheet before that?
Just to restate the overall dimensions and average expected size of the units. I think we had talked about them, I think maybe the last time we spoke to you, but it's,
Sure. So when we first made a submission, what we had was the building footprint size, not the total building square footage. It is 3 stories, it is below the height level of the zoning as required, and we have 1 and 2 bedroom units, and that's what is listed on this layout sheet as well. What we have on the right-hand side is a 24-unit building. It is the exact same size as the building we originally submitted. What we have on the left-hand side on Lot C is a 36-unit building, which is 1.5 times the size of the original building we submitted. Because of the number of units and that we dropped the last building on Lot E to make up some of the units that were lost. To note on this plan, as we've discussed in the past, and one of the things that we put on the plan is distance to those houses on Reservoir and distance across a wetlands which will never be touched, which was part of the presentation that we made to the Conservation Commission as well. Our closest building to the property line on Reservoir is, I believe, 283 feet. Not to the homes, but to the property line on Reservoir. So that's not even to the roadway, that's not to the trees that are being cut. That is building to property line.
which on Reservoir Street is probably in the middle of the road.
On Reservoir Street, there is still quite a bit of wetlands between the property line and the edge of the street, especially in the area right behind the building for Lot D. So though we don't have the interior layouts per se, what we did do in the very first public hearing was we submitted pictures of the units. The building is the exact same style that this developer has constructed in another location.
And if I can add one other thing, it became fairly clear fairly quickly that both this board and the Conservation Commission had issues with the Lot E development. And so we asked you for permission to withdraw that, to preserve that in its natural state. And that was a concession that we made. It did mean that we had to increase the size of one of the buildings, because obviously no project gets built unless it's economic. But we heard you, and we reacted, and we heard the Conservation Commission, and we reacted, and left, Lot E is left alone. And so just wanted to emphasize that.
Could I ask a question about that? Will Lot E be permanently left alone, or do you have plans in the future to possibly develop it?
I can't say it would be permanently left alone, but there are a lot of challenges to developing that, and so I think it would be quite some time, if ever. I mean, there are wetlands in close proximity, there are neighbors across the way, it's at that V. It's a challenged piece of land from a development point of view. It's a very nice piece of land from a open space and treed area, but it's certainly challenged for development.
When you drive through Route 27 in Sharon, you never doubt the possible. With that house in the middle of the road.
Yeah, I remember a place, I think it was up in Sharon, where they built the road right around the house.
That's the one, yeah.
21. And I always wondered what made those people decide that they wanted to stay there when the road was widened, but I don't know them and
No,
No
it's,
answer.
yeah.
no answer. But yes, you're right, you can never say never, but again, it's a challenged piece of land from a development point of view.
Thank you.
Tim, if I could, I'm sorry, yes.
John Shea steps in.
John Shea, to say the least, John Shea, 25 Reservoir Street. Thank you for that, I apologize. It's 10,000 per floor, thank you, Dan. So my question, which kind of wasn't answered, how many one-bedrooms, how many two-bedrooms, how many three-bedrooms?
That is,
Thank you.
they're 1 and 2 bedrooms, and the rest of it has not been determined.
Somebody said 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms at a meeting before, just saying.
And I believe actually,
That's why
is
I'm
that
asking.
right on that table there?
It is right on the table,
Okay,
that's
you
all I
can
was
scroll
gonna
up,
say.
Brian. That's what I get for trying to.
So don't feel bad, I sit at home and I go blind looking at this thing. That's why, I apologize, I've looked for this. and
So
I
if you
can't find it.
scroll over to the, yes, so this is
It's the
that chart
bottom
from
two
both?
lines under parking requirements give you the total number of units. I believe it's 36 and 24, but
One bedroom and two bedroom?
And that's for both buildings combined?
both buildings combined.
So there's no 3 bedrooms?
No.
No three bedrooms.
Okay, thank you,
Okay.
thank you.
And Jane, I see that you've raised your hand again, so I'll recognize you. If you could just state your name and address once again, please.
Hi, to be fair, Jane Rotundi, 17 Reservoir Street, sharing a computer with my husband, so he's gonna state his name, so he didn't have to log in.
Hi, this is Bill Rotundi, 17 Reservoir Street. Thank you for what you do. I know it's a very difficult job volunteering in this town, so again, thank you. 2 points on this project. The first one, and I think a woman who was further up the street kind of said that it doesn't really fit in to the area. Again, and I said this at one of the very early meetings on this project. These are 3-story buildings plus a roof, so you're essentially 4 stories high in what is essentially a residential area. 140 is residential, except for, I think there's 1 3-story house. Everything else, single family, single level. These things are gonna be a monstrosity any way you wanna cut it. Whether you're coming down 140 or whether you're looking through the woods in Reservoir Street, you're not gonna miss them because they're gonna stick out so much. Essentially like the building behind McDonald's. Which that one at least fits into a commercial area. My second point is if I think it's lot E, is taken out of the discussion at the moment, why don't you consider donating that to the town so then it stays unbuildable?
That is certainly something the applicant could do. They have not said that they will do that. So, speaking for myself in terms of a process, if the applicant doesn't do that, then I assume that at some point it will be built. So I keep that in my calculations as this could happen in the future.
Exactly.
Right now, we're only ruling on what's in front of us, but understanding that Lot E, as it sits now, and as the applicant has presented, is still open for future development, even if it is, as the applicant stated, a challenged piece of property to do so.
And again, to fit into the neighborhood and area of the town, it doesn't need any more density than what is already an over dense proposal. And that's probably poor English. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay.
Address the height real quick.
Yeah, I was just gonna state that you've said it meets the height requirements for the zone.
Correct.
And is it taller than the other buildings around it? Yes.
Maybe, maybe not. I mean, a single-family house is generally about 32 feet tall. The zone is 35 feet tall, and we're under that. So it may be taller, but it's not going to be,
It's certainly larger than a single-family house.
it is a
and
larger
is-
than
And
a
it is
single-family
tall.
house.
It's
Correct.
not a, we're not saying that you're over what the height is allowed for the zoning, you're within that requirement, but it's a big structure. That's not, yeah. Okay. Sure.
That's one I promised.
Don't promise
And
now.
this, no, Deidre Braga, 19 Reservoir Street, with the state of the country as it is today, you might be talking this later about your bylaws, there's a lot of hotels that are not only in Taunton, but in Mansfield, that are no longer hotels, okay? I have a concern, because a lot of the hotels at the end of Reservoir Street, people are now walking from there because they don't, that's no longer, half of it's not a hotel, okay? I wanna make sure, and it's maybe discussed in the bylaw, that this apartment complex doesn't turn into one of those no longer hotels and houses people that aren't looking necessarily for apartments, but temporary housing. So that may be something that you're discussing later with the bylaws, and I'd like to hear more about that.
Sure.
I don't mind addressing that.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it's been proposed as multifamily rentals, not
Right.
hotels, so.
We have a separate thing in our use table for hotels. It doesn't meet that requirement.
Yeah, and the hotels in Taunton had those same requirements, and the mayor found out the day of that it was no longer gonna be used as a hotel, right? So that's what I just wanna make sure that's not gonna happen either.
Okay. I'll ramble for a few seconds here just to see if there are any additional public comments. Not seeing anybody jumping up in the room or anybody raising their virtual hand in the meeting. At that point, I think the next two pieces in my order of operations here were if there was any additional summation you wanted to provide Mr. Jacoby, and then we would potentially, Laura, if you could pull up the document that you've been keeping about the items that we've discussed as we've gone along, just to make sure if there's anything that we need to get further clarification from the applicant prior to closing the public hearing.
So, obviously, I'm urging you to grant the special permit to my client. There have been a number of arguments that have been put forth by the abutters. I don't mean to denigrate their concerns. There's always concerns. But I did want to go over a few of the items and respond to them. The first one was that the claim was made that housing is not socially or economically desirable. I would absolutely dispute that. Housing is probably behind water and food, the most important thing to human beings. Maybe clean air falls in there somewhere in the top 3 or 4 as well. But housing is socially desirable. We do have a housing crisis in this Commonwealth, and we need to create more housing. Single-family houses are enormously expensive. I can't believe the price that they're getting for them now, but my parents probably said the same thing at some point in the past as well. But housing is socially desirable. It is economically desirable in the sense that it brings people into town who then shop at the local merchants and restaurants who are available for the labor pool. And so it is economically desirable. The question has been raised about economic impacts, and as the chairman has aptly stated, there are certain things that you just are not allowed by law to consider. A effect on schools, the fire department, other things of that nature. Early on, there was a claim that there was a study somewhere, but it was never presented to you. And so I think that you have to go by the evidence that's before you. I think that the next point that was made was that they would rather see commercial development here, which I found odd. I think in my experience, commercial development, at least today, very few dry goods retail. The traditional retail just doesn't exist. Amazon changed our lives forever, and all of their competitors. We have now, as I see with my clients, it's restaurants and medical uses that generally are what comes into commercial development these days. One of the development officers for one of my other clients said that tenants they get are where you actually have to go to the place rather than having the place deliver it to you. So a gym, a medical office, a restaurant, yes, you go to the place. Those are the kinds of tenants. In a minute, I'm going to go over that table that talks about the other uses that could be done here, mostly as a matter of right. But I would suggest to you that the other kinds of uses that could be here would have increased traffic, increased noise, increased lighting, and that this is relatively benign compared to all of those other uses. The claim was made last meeting by a gentleman who's not here tonight, that the Conservation Commission didn't like this. I don't know how he can speak for the Conservation Commission. The only thing the Conservation did was to unanimously pass the order of conditions. The claim was also made that this is 10 times the allowed density. I'm not sure where that comes from. It may be somebody looking at potentially putting up 11 single-family houses as opposed to 60 apartments. Interestingly, when you passed your zoning changes a few years ago, you eliminated the density requirements, which you might want to revisit someday. Because typically, most of the communities that I work in, you say, okay, the first unit requires 10,000 square feet, every unit after that 2,500 or something, and then you add it all up, and then you see how many units you can get on the lot. You eliminated that. So I would say to you that there is no argument that density is being violated. There was a question about impact on the wetlands, and that was peer reviewed, and the Conservation Commission accepted the peer review as well as our engineers' work, and they issued the order of conditions. There was questions about the stormwater. Again, that was peer reviewed, accepted, and accepted by the Conservation Commission. And as we said earlier, there were questions raised about traffic, and the traffic was peer reviewed, and I think it's safe to say that the firm that did the study for us, VAI, is one of the two preeminent traffic engineering firms in this state. The party you hired for the peer review, VHB, is their main competitor, and they would argue as to who's one and who's two. But they are certainly no worse than 1 and 1A in terms of their expertise. And so they peer reviewed it, they found their methodology to be correct, and that there would be no impacts. They did, our people did suggest that we, as the chairman stated, help the Commonwealth with some of their issues, and that would certainly be a condition that we would expect that you would impose, that we approach the Commonwealth and ask them to implement those traffic changes. I can't guarantee that the Commonwealth will listen, but I've never seen them not listen, because there are tens of thousands of intersections in this Commonwealth, and they just do not have the staff to go out and retime those at all, much less periodically. The standards, as I said, are that it has to be socially and economically desirable. I've covered that. It has to satisfy an existing need. The town adopted a master plan. This board, as I understand it, was a large part of that. And you called for this type of housing in this district, and the zoning was changed to allow it. And so it does satisfy an existing need for those who are not able to buy single-family houses because of cost or because of things that change in their life. Sometimes people, when they're younger, if their relationship changes, if their health changes, if their job changes, they want to be able to move on and not have to sell a piece of property. So the rental apartments are fill a need in the community. Would also suggest to you that there's not an insignificant factor in that we are extending the sewer line from the center of town all the way to this property. My understanding is that the sewer commission is very pleased with that because we are paying for something that they would like to do but don't have the funds currently. As we pointed out, no one will be required to hook up to it, but my further understanding, and it's memorialized in the bylaw, is that when your septic system fails, then you have to hook up unless there is a manifest economic cost that is just beyond the pale, and then you can apply for an abatement from that. But one of the things that I understand environmentally is that all septic systems fail sooner or later. They are in the groundwater. Sewering is more environmentally sound than having septic systems. If I can, I did put in writing to you back in October. It's been a long time we've been doing this. And I did point out to you that this district allows, as a matter of right, not only single-family homes, but top-of-the-shop housing, which is apartments above commercial, although there is no definition in your bylaw. I think we all know what it means.
It's like, if I could, is any of the housing that's allowed in that type of district. If single-family homes are allowed, you can put a single-family home allowed up there. If dormitories are allowed, you can put dormitories. It's whatever type of residence is allowed within that.
Correct. And you can have a tourist or rooming house, a bed and breakfast, an educational facility, a religious facility, a private school, a health or recreational club, a fraternal lodge, professional offices, bank, retail stores, medical, dental offices, conference centers, corporate offices, repair shops, wholesale offices, a bus terminal, commercial parking lot, restaurants, artisan manufacturing, or indoor recreation. I would submit to you that all of those would have a far greater impact on our neighbors than this development. As we pointed out to you, there is quite a distance across a wetland that absolutely will never be built on between us and the neighbors on Reservoir. And so we believe that there will be no adverse impact on them. So that was my long-winded way of saying that we submit to you that we have met the standards for the granting of this special permit, and we hopefully look forward to a positive vote from your board.
And you feel free to sit down, but I think before we close the public hearing, I just wanted to make sure that the board took the opportunity to run through all of the items that we've been tracking over this process and make sure that if there is any clarification needed, that we get it before we close.
Yes, correct, because once we close, we're closed.
Exactly.
So if there are any questions that still exist, we're certainly willing to answer them.
Thank you. So Laura, I will let you drive since you have the document open here.
There's not much.
Okay.
So the grayed out ones have been resolved that we've discussed, that I felt comfortable just marking off as we've discussed here.
Okay.
We need to discuss the affordable housing. There are 5 previous stormwater standards that according to the Horsley Witten peer review of March 14th, that needed to be reviewed.
And those,
However,
yeah.
yeah,
Sorry.
however, Concom has closed and issued a wetland permit in an order of conditions, so I'm assuming that Horsley Witten's peer review of the last response from Level Design is satisfactorily resolved. So I'm gonna mark 6 through 10 as resolved. I just wanna get the board's approval before I mark this as okay, with regards to the fire department's review of access and clearance, both with and without snow storage. Paul had noted the deputy chief said it looked fine for access and clearance. Are we comfortable that it's okay with snow storage as well?
I think, yeah, the applicant's proposed snow storage. If we have any objections to what they proposed, we should raise them to the larger point about fire. If we feel that we want a condition for fire department officially approves, signs off on access to the site as a conditional approval for the file, then I don't see the applicant having any questions.
Well, how does the board feel about that?
As you said, Paul, the deputy chief didn't have objections to access to the site, but I think I'm viewing this as making sure that we have it in writing. That's how I'm viewing it.
Good, so you would like to prefer to condition it?
I see it as a no-risk issue to condition,
Agreed.
other than the generation of electronic paper.
Okay. So I'm gonna move that forward to conditions, just as a reminder. That is the last pending Concom status, obviously, since we have their order of conditions. At this time, other than the scale of the plans, I saw no requests for waivers in any of the site plan or narratives. So presuming we're moving forward without voting on anything. For project conditions, we have potentially affordable housing. Do we want to condition the stretch code compliance with the 20% electric vehicle ready? Is that something we need to do?
That's required.
Or
by
is
the-
it-
That's required by the state,
Okay,
I think.
I wasn't sure. All right, so we'll delete that. There were 2 conditions that were recommended by Van Ness in regards to site distance analysis. They recommended trimming and removal of vegetation for site triangle, and then the site distance analysis, same thing. Condition that no snow objects or snow that exceed 2.5 feet should be placed within that site triangle. One we've already talked about, employ the Department of Transportation to optimize the traffic signals to improve level of service at Route 140 and 123 as detailed in the mitigation section of the traffic analysis. Condition of installation of 2,700 feet of sewer from 123 to the project site. What I didn't know is, do we or should we reference conservation special conditions issued within the wetland permit?
I feel like every time we have something that crosses both boards, we debate this, whether we should reference it. And
Yeah, their special conditions goes for like 4 pages.
I have no issue including it as a reference.
Okay, I think that would be the cleanest way of going about it. And the recently just added fire department review of access and clearage with snow storage.
Sure.
Did I miss anything? Did anybody see anything?
Not
else?
usually.
I don't know if this is, can you just, as we set up for potential discussion later,
Mhm.
can you just put in for discussion, confirming rules are on multifamily and versus hotel. To see if there's any, just to make sure that we look at those two definitions and make sure that we're, yeah. And it's been in the news a lot recently,
Mhm.
so.
I haven't heard of any instances where they've been put into apartments, though.
You never know what the state will come up with.
Yeah. Well, and if the state decides,
Whatever we put in here probably won't matter, is that what you're?
exactly, yeah, like, it's gonna be the solar bylaws all
Well,
over again, yeah.
Yeah, well,
We're just gonna do what the state tells us to do.
Yeah, well, we can cross that bridge when we get to it.
Yep.
The two here that I see Mr. Jacoby at the podium, would be related to the site distances and making sure that nothing is in the way of those. I'm assuming that you would not have an objection to a condition for an operations and maintenance plan for the project, which would include those two requirements from Venice.
Oh, absolutely. No problem.
Sorry, they're not Venice anymore.
And with regard to the short-term rentals, we don't intend any short-term rentals. I don't remember in your bylaw definition, but if you wanted to include a condition that there be no rentals of less than 30 days or something along those lines to stop it from being a hotel. We're looking for much longer leases.
Yes.
I don't think that was my concern.
I understand what your concern
Okay.
is, yes.
Thank you.
So, you know, if you wanted to craft something that said no rental less than X number of days, like 30, then we have no problem with that.
I think the abutter's concern was in relation to the state's housing of
Yeah.
migrants that are coming into the US.
And
So
if they took
it's
over
a
our
mess at the
building-
state and the federal level, so I had just put that, just to, as we look at a property of this size with apartments, just to look at our own bylaws and see what applies, that's it.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's something we can solve here tonight.
If we could solve it in one meeting in the town of Norton, then we'll be famous tomorrow. Okay.
The one thing I don't have in here is a operation and maintenance plan, we should probably condition that.
Yeah, and that would basically encompass rows 10 and 11 there.
Yep.
The operation and maintenance plan would probably also include all of the, in practice, it would include all of the wetland stuff, which is in our purview.
Yep.
What's in our purview, the operation and maintenance plan with these conditions is trim the trees so people can see on the driveways.
Yep, and don't store anything at the exits.
For members of the board, I do see you up there. Are there any other conditions, as we've discussed this project, that we want to put on this list for a discussion, and which we might need the applicant to weigh in on? Okay. Mr. Campbell, I see you at the podium.
I just wanted to mention that as part of the VHB review, that is one of the reasons that we planted the larger trees along the frontage, so that there was a maintenance requirement and there's no shrubbery planted in there that you'll notice on the landscape plan. So we did try and incorporate that in our current design.
You never know what trees will be taken down and what things can get put in their place. And,
I agree.
it turns me into a cynic sometimes. Okay. Anything else that we wanted to address at this point? Or anything else that we want to ask the applicant prior to closing the public hearing?
One more. If affordable housing is not going to be willfully achieved, there is the option of granting the town land in lieu of having affordable housing. Would Lot E be that potential land that could be used
the applicant would ultimately be able to decide whether they meet it via actually providing affordable housing, payment in lieu, or any other method. I don't. So I think that would be my, I don't know how things add up and what is worth what to qualify that as a potential option.
Sure.
If the applicant wanted to consider that and bring that to the town as an option in those discussions, they certainly could if it got to that point. If you'd like to.
That's exactly what I was gonna say. Obviously, I can't make a commitment at once, but it's an interesting idea and one that can be explored.
Okay. So, yeah, the affordable housing requirement says, I think it says, they either meet the requirement or they provide something equal to
Attached
whatever,
land, yeah.
equal to whatever.
Yeah.
However, we would value different things as a whole level of math and actuarial detail that, I don't think we need to get into tonight, and my brain will explode.
My question is, if we were to approve or deny something tonight, how do we set forth the idea of procuring land or setting that option on the table later on?
They know it's an option. It's always an option for them. If we choose to, however we address the affordable, the condition would be whether or not we are conditioning that this project meets this town's affordable housing bylaw. We say project must meet the town's affordable housing bylaw.
Regardless of the
Period.
solution how?
Just say they need to meet it.
Okay.
However they choose to reach that end, the applicant could, as they've stated, could choose to appeal that condition as well, depending on how they have said they interpret our bylaw and how they want the process to go forward, so. If there are affordable units at the property, all the better. Is there anything else that we would like to discuss with the applicant at this time? Otherwise, I would potentially look for a motion to close the public hearing, absent any further comments.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Sure, if you'd like to come up and just give a summation here.
Quick question. John Shea, 25 Reservoir Street. As the board votes yea or nay, am I allowed to ask them to elaborate on their yea and nay? The justification as to why they're voting or no?
Let's see. I think it'll generally be obvious in the discussions that we have after this public hearing is closed. If it is not, I'm generally not going to allow you to go up to the podium and say, why did you vote this way? If you choose to have a discussion with somebody outside of this meeting, everybody's a private citizen.
No, not more confrontational, more quizzical. That's why I'm asking, like, I don't know, like, it's, like, they just say yes or no and move on. Like, is the town allowed to understand the yes, no? And I know you just said, meet them one-on-one, or is that like a
I mean,
question that's out of bounds?
When
But
we
what I'm asking right now is-
issue a decision,
Yeah.
one way or another,
Yeah.
we have to give a reason.
Okay, all right, cool.
And we give that in writing in the decision.
You all have to write your answers?
No, as a
Whatever
group,
the deciding vote is.
as a group,
Individual ones would be fun.
as long as nobody has to read my handwriting.
Supreme Court supporting sitting there.
Okay. So we had a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Again, after closing the public hearing, we will not accept any additional comments from members of the public. We will not recognize any additional comments or submissions from the applicant themselves. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on that motion or anything else that we want to say prior to its action? Okay. I will now go through the roll for the vote. Again, this is a vote to close the public hearing only. It is not a vote on any decision therefore. So Eric, I will start with you.
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Wayne?
Yes.
Laura?
Yes.
Alan?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. So the public hearing is now closed.
Sorry, we didn't hear who made the motions?
Oh,
I did, made the motion.
Second.
Steve
Thank
was
you.
second, Jim was motion, yes. Sorry, usually I restate, so I'm off my game.
You
Okay.
got caught off guard.
It
Someone
happens.
jumped in at the last second.
Nah, I'll just blame myself, that's easier. Okay, so the public hearing is closed. As I had said before, I wanna try and let us go into a little bit of discussion about the lighting bylaw and go into that, and then we can have a board-only discussion about, what decision we are going to reach on this item, on the 0 Mansfield Avenue agenda item. And because of the elections, we do need to close it out tonight. So, no objection with that. We'll move forward with the next item on our agenda, which is a citizen's petition to discuss changes to the town's lighting bylaw. Laura, do you want to stop sharing your screen just for a bit?
You got it?
I know that, thank you for waiting patiently.
No problem.
Sorry to give you an in-depth update on how the planning board operates. Brian, if you wanted to share.
All set? Thank you very much for allowing me to speak tonight about actually I have the lighting bylaw and camera bylaws.
Sorry, yes.
That's okay, just wanted to make sure that they're both. My name is Pereska Constantine, you can call me Stella. I live at 312A South Worcester Street. I purchased my home in 2010 with my fiance. The covenant of quiet enjoyment in both tenancy and real estate law states that the owner has the right to use their property under the covenant of quiet enjoyment. The current bylaw for lighting excludes single and family homes, and I'm asking the town to include single and family homes on the current bylaws. So I'm basically just asking to strike letter A under 175.20.2. Right now, lighting, which is an accessory in use to 1 and 2 family residential dwellings, it excludes that. So I'm asking the town to strike letter A and then renumber accordingly. The reason I have put forth this petition is the last couple of years, actually going on 3 years, I've had neighbors flashing lights on my property. I've had to put cheap paper blinds up to cover my windows. I can't open my windows at night. And it's very, just upsetting that I can't enjoy my home the way it was intended to. So that's that. And sorry, I hate talking in front of people.
That's okay. So, understand the request, certainly. And I think that it's probably the single and 2-family homes are probably excluded for the simple reason of somebody has their driveway, they have a motion sensor light on the outside of their driveway, so when they go outside to check the mailbox or put out their trash cans, that they can see. And that they don't need to comply with necessarily the guidelines here. Brian, does the warrant go down and show the rest of the bylaw?
Well, this is the only part that's being affected.
Does it show the rest though? Just to show the requirements of the loading lighting bylaw?
I have it.
Up too high. I don't know if there's more. There's more, because it's just sort of objectives and standards.
Yeah, it's under
Okay.
objectives and standards. And it says lighting levels
There's
shall
more,
be
so I'm just gonna stop
appropriate
sharing what you do.
for the intended use. Excessive levels of light, glare, and light trespass will not be permitted. So basically, that's what I'm asking the town to do, because the light is trespassing over my property line into a wooded area that's towards the side of the house, and I'm sure I'm not the only resident in town that's having an issue.
I know my neighbor has a bright light in their driveway that comes into one of the whole, which way is that facing? North side of my house, probably 60% of the evenings.
Yeah, my neighbor does the same thing, the motion sensor, right across the street into my bedroom.
Yeah.
Yeah, my living room
What's the
lit up
source
all
of the
night.
light, if you don't mind me asking? Like, is it there Is it censored lights? Is
It's
it
a
car
sens-
lights?
it's
Is
a- It's a sensor light that is pointed at our property, so when an animal comes on our property, the motion light will go on.
Tim, earlier this evening, I rewrote that little section.
Yeah,
after-
I just
after-
wanted to go to what we have now.
Oh, so it was.
So
That is the whole thing, yeah.
if you wanna so what I'm cognizant of is just going through, this is the rest of the bylaw here. And so we're saying that lighting levels should be appropriate for the intended use, makes sense. If we go down to B, and it says, the use of floodlights should not be permitted except with explicit approval of the planning board, it will not include light levels which exceed recognized standards. So, if we just strike the exception, the bylaw would be saying that anybody who wants to put a floodlight in their house needs to come before the board and get a permit for it. I'm interpreting that correctly, correct, Paul?
So are you saying that businesses have to come before the board
With the light,
with the lighting?
the applicant here presented a lighting plan for their development, and it went through, okay, these are the lights that we're proposing, they give off this much light in this cone, so here's the map of the site, and here's all the light. Some of them aren't that detailed, they say, we're gonna have down-facing, they call them wall packs, so those square lights that you see on the side of commercial buildings that point down at the sidewalk. And sometimes that's acceptable, but
So when somebody builds a one-family home, they don't have to present the lightings. So if you strike this, you're telling me that everybody has to come before you and present the lighting laws.
if they wanna put a floodlight in there,
So then how do we?
just with point B.
That doesn't make sense to me.
That's, if we strike the residential exception, that's what it says.
So basically, residential homes have no, so
There's-
basically, I can't, as a homeowner, I have no recourse with flashing lights from a neighbor. So how do we?
Based on this bylaw specifically,
Okay,
no,
so
you-
how do we fix that?
that is something that I'm challenged to find out. I'm not sure if,
I think I might have come up with a reasonable solution to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I
that's
emailed
why
it
I'm
earlier.
here, I mean, I don't know the laws,
so,
this is what I was kind of told to do, to
So-
come here,
yeah,
to do the petition, so I would like to kind of move forward with something to remedy this, because I'm sure I'm not the only homeowner in the town of Norton that is having an issue,
sure.
and nobody should have to live like this.
Have you had conversations with the neighbor?
Yeah, I don't even want to go there.
I
I mean, a
assume that you
simple
wouldn't
just
have gone
tilting
through
the
all the
light.
effort to do this if you
Exactly.
hadn't done that.
Exactly, I mean, it's
Um,
to the point where it's borderline harassment, what we've been going through between lights and cameras on our property, going on over 3 years, maybe even 4 now. So I wanna kind of try to remedy this the right way. I mean, I've had the police down my home numerous times, and I'm too old for this crap.
Understood. Paul, do you
Mr.
have?
Chairman, if I could,
Sure, Alan.
just before we go any farther, I just think this is a bad precedent, to be setting. We're not here to settle disputes for neighbors. We set policy for the town. We don't, this just seems too, I don't know, I'm very much against this as proposed, and this is more of a commercial bylaw, has nothing to do with residential. Like I said, we don't solve disputes between neighbors. And it seems
And I'm not
beyond
asking,
that.
and I'm
I'm
not
talking.
asking you,
I'm talking.
sorry.
That's okay.
This seems out of our, I'm not gonna say out of our purview, but I don't believe this belongs in front of us. And, I'm strongly against this as it is proposed right now. And in any form. If there was a whole new residential lighting bylaw proposed, that would be completely different.
Thank you, Alan. And don't worry, I know it's sometimes challenging talking in person and
Yeah.
Zoom
No,
and
I get it,
we're not
I
trying to.
apologize.
No, no worries.
But I'm not asking the board, the planning board, to remedy any disputes that I'm having. I'm just trying to come up with some type of lighting laws that does not apply to single-family homes right now. And when I was talking to everybody in the town, they suggested that I start here by striking that one line with the lighting laws. So if this only applies to commercial, I understand that. So maybe there's another, maybe we can come up with another bylaw.
It applies to everybody as it is now, but that exception for 1 and 2 family homes means that it doesn't apply to 95% of the residential
Okay.
properties in town. It does apply to multifamilies, like the one that we heard earlier,
Yeah.
which, because they're bigger, they need more lighting, and it makes sense to look at it and make sure they're not gonna have a whole bunch of lights that lights it up like Gillette Stadium.
Right.
So, I'm not sure, Steve, I apologize, I haven't had the chance to go through in detail what you had sent around earlier.
It's mostly a rearrangement of what's there, it's not anything
Yeah.
vastly different.
Did you have that, is this Steve's proposal up, Paul?
I believe it is.
Okay, so, Steve, if you can just walk through
Sure.
the logic here, and whether it's something that we act on this evening or think about in the future.
Sure.
So, you've removed the exemption, and then what is the,
Well, I placed the exemption further down, if you scroll down a little bit,
yeah,
where I found some of it is applicable only to commercial stuff and shouldn't be applied to single-family homes, but some of it could be applied to single-family homes. Like, a single-family home shouldn't be shining light into another yard, but the type of light or the height of it might be allowed. They shouldn't necessarily be, like a single-family home could put floodlights if it's not shining into somebody's yard. We already have the ruling there that says it can't shine into another person's yard. Like, you can't have 0.1 foot candle of illumination in someone else's yard. Regardless of the type of light you use, you're not permitted to do that. So.
okay.
If somebody's,
To meet that standard, you're requiring, if I wanna put a floodlight on the back of my house, for me to get lighting measurements.
I suppose, if there was going to be a way that does this.
That's the line where I have a trouble with this.
And that's why, like, I
As a
put for
broad
emergency
stroke.
lighting,
Yeah,
like a floodlight for emergency lighting should be allowed, that's basically kind of what and then I
How are you
exempted,
gonna differentiate between a whole nother lighting system for their regular motion sensor versus emergency?
because
Like, how
it
is that-
regulates it on there where the light can shine and how much.
How
it
is
can
the
illuminate.
homeowner gonna do that?
I mean, well, again, let's take it to the extreme. Can I just go in my yard right now, take a giant floodlight and shine it at my neighbor's houses? Without any regulation, like, I can get a whole series of floodlights and shine it at everybody's houses. So,
in theory, yes, you could, you probably wouldn't have very happy neighbors.
so there is a reasonable cause to put something in there. You're not supposed to necessarily forbid somebody, if somebody's on 5 acres, they can't put a floodlight on their barn, that seems like they should, but they shouldn't be able to shine it in somebody else's yard.
Yeah.
So
So-
I'll take our area, how are you in Reservoir down in the Grove area where you have all sorts of non-conforming, any kind of spotlight is going on neighbors' properties. You don't have a typical acre lot. How are you gonna then enforce if it's a non-conforming lot? They just built a house that literally has no yard. If their bedroom light goes on, that light's gonna cast down into the neighbor's yard.
It seems like the type of thing that would give legal standing for it to be
It's just
enforced
opening up
when
a
it's a
can of
violation.
worms that I don't think we are gonna be able to govern and enforce. And it's gonna create a backlash of animosity amongst neighbors, even more so than she's already got. Like, I would like to think that if the neighbor knew that their light was flashing, just trying to tilt it down so that it covers their property, it'd still be bright. But common decency isn't necessarily gonna be winning the day.
Yeah.
I agree with the idea that most people should be able to do almost anything they want with their own property. Almost anything. Until it interrupts the next property. And by moving the residential lighting requirement down, the exemption below not letting your light go onto somebody else's yard. That's the standard. If a neighbor can pull out a light measurement tool and check how many lumens are on
Again,
their
just go
town-
down into the Grove and see what you're gonna open up.
I understand, I live there, I have a light
So, I'm
shining
in the
in my
same
living
thing.
room right now,
How are
tonight.
you gonna do that?
If I want to enforce against my neighbor, if they're not willing to have an actual discussion, then I would have legal precedent to do something. Right now, we can't do anything. And the neighbor can't do anything, the resident can't do anything. Yes, it would be nice if everybody got along, it would be great to do it benevolently, but some people are not that way, and you need a ground to stand on. Again, I live in the Grove, my living room is lit up every single night. I can't stop my neighbor from doing that.
Okay. Steve, just from a point of information, were the additions that you put in under E there, were they drawn from another town, or is it just something you developed?
Under E, I didn't put any additions. The only addition I put was C for emergency lighting, but everything else is what's in our bylaw already. I just took the things that apply to the planning board and gave it its own section. We can-
Okay, gotcha. Okay. But none of this is from another town's bylaws?
This is
from-
exactly what we had, just slightly rearranged.
Okay. Let's see. Let's see. Speaking for myself, I appreciate the work that you put into this. I'm not sure if I would be prepared to recommend this to town meeting tonight.
I'm more than happy to analyze it. I don't have to recommend it tonight, but I wanted to
Yeah.
propose something to help
Yeah.
out.
If I could also offer, I could be wrong, we should probably check with town council, but because this is a citizen's petition, it needs to go to town meeting as written. We can't amend it.
Right. Yeah, so, and all that we're doing here is we are giving all this board's position is we give a recommendation to town meeting.
Okay.
And they will call the article on town meeting. If you choose to come up and present and say, yes, this is my petition, I want to do this for X, Y, and Z reasons, then I'll find a microphone and say, the planning board voted on this and voted to endorse it or not to endorse it to town meeting.
But you
And then
can
town
also-
meeting can do whatever it wants.
And then at that
Town meeting
point-
doesn't have to listen to us.
I get it. So at that point, would you put into motion what you suggested? Is that how this all works? Because this is all new to me. I don't.
So,
Very new to me.
anybody can amend anything on the floor of town meeting. It
Okay.
is the wild west of local politics.
Okay.
I don't
Um,
think you can amend a petition, a citizen's petition.
On the floor,
I don't think you can.
I think you can. I think we've tried to edit, people have tried to motion in writing for those petitions.
Oh, sewer,
They've,
7.5 years.
yeah, they've changed,
And that was a citizen's petition.
yeah.
Okay.
So, they've changed
Sorry.
them.
Yeah.
So, changes to what you've submitted in your petitioned article have to be done in writing to the moderator. Somebody could submit this if they wanted to. Speaking for myself as a board member, I'm not sure I would feel comfortable recommending it without having looked at it and compared it to other local towns. And I think kind of the discussion that I had about if we take that away, then anybody who wants to build a house that wants a spotlight on that driveway would in theory need to come to us for approval. And that's a burden that I think is the challenge.
Oh, yeah, I don't want to make any more work for you, believe me.
I'm not thinking about work for me, I mean, I wanna keep busy, I'm just kidding. What I don't, it seems like it would be an overreach of government telling people what to do.
Yeah.
Even if, So. Get to you in just a second.
I just didn't know if I was able to join.
I saw you
this
join in the
discussion.
corner of my, in the corner of my eye, so I thought you had something that
Thank
you
you.
wanted to say. So I think, to Alan's point, I would have a hard time endorsing this for town meeting
Okay.
as it's written. Is there anything that you would want to add to that, if you'd like? Ms. Senior had a thought in the comment.
No, I just, if we can come up with something, you know, that would be great. And I don't, it's not about a neighbor dispute, it's like, I should be able to use my property and not have flashing lights from when it turns dark all the way to dusk, all the way to dawn, facing my bedroom. That's what I'm, and I'm sure I'm not, the only person dealing with this issue in the town of Norton. So if there's some way we can, if we can't change the existing bylaw because it's more for commercial, I get that. Maybe if we can write something else for lighting, I would be grateful for that too.
Okay. If you don't mind. I just
Oh,
wanted
sure,
to-
please, thank you, I'm sorry.
No,
Don't mean to be obnoxious, but this really resonates with me, so obviously I live in the Grove as well, so I'm familiar with this kind of a thing. And so what happened to us is, in the fall, a neighbor who lives probably, I'm gonna say about 800 feet diagonally behind us on the opposite side of a side street, replaced their floodlight with this giant LED. It is so obnoxious. And not only does it light up every room in my house once it comes on after dark, the side street that I'm on, several of the light-colored houses light up like Christmas trees. It's crazy how much light, how much illumination, how far it carries. Because for those houses, it's probably even further. So is it the fact that the type of light, and you do have a line in there that talks about what's preferred. Is this something that can be addressed as far as if it has to be an LED? If you can't say you can't do an LED, can a wattage or some kind of control be added to it?
It's something
Like a
that we,
general lighting?
it's something that we could consider. It's not something that we can, right now as a board, we can only endorse what Stella has
Mhm.
presented. We can endorse or not endorse it. What happens at town meeting after that point, it's not our board, it's
I
town meeting.
understand that, but it made me think that maybe it hasn't been looked at since the advent of all this easy
There-
access LED
We're having
lighting
trouble
and
with
sticking
it.
on the sides of the
The
houses.
number of bylaws that we have on our list that we would like to spend time on and reviewing,
Mhm.
continues to grow probably every month. Norton does not have a sound bylaw. Norton does not has this lighting bylaw, which doesn't address single and two-family homes. Doesn't have a lot of things. We are currently going through a zoning recodification process, which is another thing in process. I'm not sure if the lighting bylaw, I don't think we've hit that yet in our recodification review.
Okay.
If that is something that maybe we can flag for the attorney working on that process. It wouldn't be something that would be addressed at this town meeting upcoming, but it would be something that would potentially be addressed at a subsequent town meeting when we're looking to get the town to approve the recodification.
And the sound bylaw is going to be evaluated at some point in time in the,
I know it's on my
Future.
list. I've talked about it, I've
Well-
talked about decibels and ambient background levels far too many times.
well, now that so many people are working at least part of the time from home, again, the Grove is the place to go and look and see, it's insane. The noise, what goes on, just trash trucks, the fact that we don't have it, the town doesn't collect it, so there's trash trucks every day in the neighborhood. It can be difficult, but the lighting is something, just talking about it last night, how disturbing it is. You can't go out in your backyard, it's like being underneath,
Understood.
stage lights.
Okay. Do you have initial comments or questions for the petitioner as it relates to this article? Or do we want to move forward with a motion to endorse?
I sympathize with your plight. I'm in the same boat, but I couldn't endorse this to the town the way it's written. I think it just would open up Pandora's box.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd say the same, as written with just scratching off the residential, it's too overwhelming.
Anybody like to make a motion?
Motion to endorse the citizens petition from Mrs. Constantine.
Seconded. Oh.
So thank you, Laura, for the motion. I'm gonna say Steve for the second. Close. Again, the motion is in the affirmative. I'll go through the roll. Eric?
No.
Jim?
No.
Steve?
No.
Wayne?
No.
Laura?
No.
Alan?
No,
And I will vote no as well. But obviously, you can still present at town meeting for this article, discuss it, and town meeting can choose to act on it.
And just so I can understand everything correctly, the town meeting, they'll be able to change it with me?
You can
Tell
submit
me.
any changes that you would like to the moderator in writing.
Okay.
If you'd like to ask the town moderator in advance what their requirements are, they then consider whether they think the proposed changes is within the scope of the petition. So basically, are we still talking about the same thing? Or is you coming in with, the extreme example would be, the petition was to change the lighting bylaw, but instead I'm gonna amend it and add sound, which would be completely different. So it's the moderator's discretion what's within talking about the same thing. So if you choose to try to do that in writing, you can do that. Then it's just a matter of getting town meeting to understand what you're presenting.
Okay,
Which-
so it's basically lighting law for lighting law.
It's the moderator's discretion as to what they see as part of the scope. Okay? So we have the lighting bylaw, and you also had the camera bylaw.
Yes.
Paul, I see you're popping up here. Is there something that you wanted to say?
Just to let everyone know that this item will be taken up by the select board this Thursday. So, but tomorrow I'll draft a memo reflecting the vote to the select board. But it'll be Thursday, starting at 7 o'clock at the Norton Housing Authority.
Send it over at 6:58. Just keep them waiting. No, I'm just kidding.
Maybe the Zoom will get on time.
That's okay.
Too soon?
Okay. And the other bylaw that you had was a
The
camera
other
bylaw.
bylaw that I was proposing is,
Is that one to share?
We don't even need to vote on it because it's a general bylaw, it's not in our purview.
Okay.
Done zoning, yeah.
so do I present it or not?
No, you don't have to present it.
Okay.
If you'd like to, you certainly can. We're a town board to listen to residents, but it's not something, it's not a zoning bylaw, so we don't give a recommendation on it.
Okay, so I won't waste your time.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, I appreciate it.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Okay. So, that is out of the way. So, going back to, is everybody prepared to go back to our discussion on decision for 0 Mansfield Avenue? Okay. Laura, if you don't mind pulling up the conditions again.
Sure.
And actually, as I say that, I think that, actually, I'll do that. So, looking at the conditions that we discussed earlier, are there any of these conditions outside of the affordable housing where we have any disagreement among the board about whether it is warranted, whether we should have it, or whether having it or not having it, if you think it's contentious and your decision on the application as a whole rests on it, then just speak up in that respect. If we think that all of these are straightforward and we're all in agreement, then we don't need to talk about them.
It's not gonna be the basis for the way I'm gonna vote.
Right, exactly.
That's all, I'm good with that.
Yeah, I'm good.
I'm all set.
Okay. So the key one, I'm gonna say, is probably the affordable housing one. So, let me just try and,
Do you want me to stop sharing?
yes, I was going to pull up,
I have it if you want to share, me to share it.
sure, why don't you put that up?
Okay.
And we can read as my lawyer friends like to say, read within the four corners of the page. This is what the bylaw says for affordable housing. So, let me see, I think
Down a little.
is the gallery scrolling, covering the point where it talks about the date, which is the.
Let me scroll down.
Yes, so applicability. So this is the piece that is the center of, and.
Yeah,
Which is-
2003.
Yeah, can you just drag the people over to the left side of the screen so that we can all read that section? Doesn't need to be, yeah. So, division of land. So the bylaw shall apply to the division of land held in single ownership as of this date or any time thereafter into 6 or more lots, whether such created at one time or blah, blah, blah. So, the applicant has stated that this bylaw says that it only applies to things that happened after this date, or before this date.
Before the date.
Which is, if you look at the plain language, you could make that read on it. The piece of it, the other piece of it is that, I think we have this from, let me find
I think that, or any time after is key.
That's not what they're looking, he's looking at.
Yeah, we're looking at B, Steve.
At B.
Oh.
It's very short. Well, that's just it. So if you look at A and B, I know you look at the four corners because all applicability. In division by land, it says as of October 8th, 2003, anytime thereafter. That makes sense, right? That's
But B-
what you want to see. B, for some weird reason, says in existence of October 8th, 2003, which reading B, the one sentence that's there, sounds like that day and before. Because it says in existence as of. Why it's written that way, I have no idea, but in my opinion, because I've looked at this a few times now, trying to wrap my head around it, I believe Mr. Jacoby has the right interpretation.
okay. And I will say that, that statement, and we do have a read from town council,
Yep.
which says differently, A. And B, town council did say, and I'll just, for whatever it is worth, that it is generally up to the board to give its read of what it is actually saying. So we are supposed to get kind of quote-unquote deference in that respect.
They also made a point to say, though, that they were worried about the cost of single-family housing. So if that's truly a driving force behind this, then why not have affordable apartments? Because I've seen rent also, that rent's also out of control. So if that's
Oh, yeah.
indeed a concern, why would this be so contentious?
But that's, I think what it is, it's like bylaw written versus bylaw.
Poorly written, right,
Yeah,
interpreted one way or the
You're
other.
right, it's,
Agreed.
you know, did it go by how it's written or how it's supposed to be written, like the
Mhm.
interpretation.
But in the spirit of it. what I'm
The spirit, yeah. Spirit of the law versus how it was written.
Mhm.
And it's kind of, yeah, I mean, I already said where I was going with it, but
Now,
you know, I don't know, like I said, I don't understand why it was written that way personally.
I can give context on that.
Oh, cool.
So, they were approved, this bylaw was approved at the October 8th, 2003 meeting.
Oh,
So they just did it very
Wow.
literally.
And
It was an amendment on the floor.
so,
Oh,
here is the, so that is the reason for the date.
okay.
So, it is we are in a linguistic challenge here.
It does seem counter to the point that we would put into the bylaw that we want to, as of then, but now for 21 years, not apply affordable housing.
That
It's
That
very
was,
counter.
that was the core of town council's argument, is that the reading it in the other way made it nonsensical.
Yeah,
Right.
you have to kind of look to the logic.
Revert back to A.
Which I hate.
Agreed, it's vague and leaves open for all sorts of interpretation and argument, but the spirit, again,
Yes.
was designed to have more.
This is the crux of this condition, of
Is
whether we
this gonna
include
be
this condition
again-
or not.
Is this gonna be a situation where this, again, holds up someone's approval of it or not? Because it's not gonna be the reason for my approval or disapproval. That's not the crux of my voting.
This is a massive precedent for everything else that comes forward. This absolutely needs to be settled one way or another.
But it needs to be rewritten, we can't do that right now with this.
Yes, it definitely has to be rewritten, but
Right,
we're
but we
working
can't
on
do
it
that
now.
now, we can't.
Yeah.
Well, no, we're
That's
not
what
doing
I'm
it
saying.
tonight, but
No,
we're
that's
doing
what
it
I'm
with,
saying.
but we're going through the bylaw. revision.
What I'm saying
Right,
is,
right,
Dip's
right,
thinking, is
clarification.
this gonna be something that holds up someone's vote, yea or nay? Because if people say, no, this isn't the decided reason, then we can just say, okay, we don't need this
I mean,
as part
we're
of our
putting in-
conditions, and then adjust it later on to read the right way, is what I'm saying, just trying to shorten it up and make it more common sense.
I'm not sure if it's the deciding factor in a vote. But I'll say from my perspective, from a high-level perspective, this type of development is exactly what an affordable bylaw is supposed to apply to.
Yeah, exactly, I agree.
And
And
I
town
like
council
reading
saying-
between the four corners, and I hate that logic is telling me not to. So,
But town council says it comes
Town-
down to us at the end anyway.
town council has given us an opinion based on precedent as she sees it, and said that it's ultimately our decision to interpret the bylaw A, and that, in theory, the town is supposed to have some level of deference in how we interpret our own bylaws.
I would follow her lead then.
In my opinion, I believe we should include this in a condition. I believe whether it's written poorly or not, in the spirit of the law, we know it's supposed to apply. It only makes sense that it applies. And this is just another reason why modifying things at town meeting, just put it in the list of things that just gets messed up every time that is done.
Okay. This is one condition where I would like us to have a vote on prior to making a vote on a decision. Is there anything else anybody would like to add to this point prior to doing so?
My only other concern, if this becomes an appealable issue,
Yes,
And
it's
then-
clearly an appealable issue.
because then if they go the nuclear option and appeal, go to the courts and stuff like that,
Then town council will be arguing against their attorney in court,
yeah.
and the entire process will be delayed.
Cool.
So that's, and the applicant said, I think in one of our past sessions, they disagree with this interpretation, the one that we're talking about. And they would consider whether or not they wanted to appeal and look at the economics of that versus the economics of delay versus
This is
everything
why I
else.
was saying to Dipstick and see if this was the, because if we do put it as a condition, and then it gets voted down, then that becomes the crux of the, or if it's not a condition and it gets voted down, then it's no longer, that's an appealable action, correct?
They can choose to appeal whether we put this in.
Right, but I'm saying that part of it, where we're hazy with the wording, would be out of the mix, so to speak. Because what I'm saying is like, I've come to what I'm gonna make a decision on, and it has nothing to do with the Affordable Housing Act. So if I'm gonna vote in the negative, I don't necessarily want that in there as a condition, because then if it is a condition and it's voted down, then that condition can be part of the appeal and like, hey, this is a misinterpretation of
The
this.
condition only applies if it's approved.
Okay, then it's, but what if they appeal though?
They're
Say-
appealing the denial based on what reasons that we include in the decision.
Okay, all right, so then.
We're not going to deny it.
Based on a
because the-
condition
the-
that we've approved.
Right,
Right,
because the
got it.
condition is that before it moves forward, they have to meet the affordable.
That was my
housing
question,
bylaw.
is that if that's in there, could that be part of the appeal process? That's all I was trying to get to.
If it's denied, then
It'll be
they
based on what
they
the
wouldn't have ever met the,
condition anyway.
had a burden
Perfect.
against this
Okay.
condition. That's a way too of a legal answer than I wanted to give at the moment, but.
Another
Especially
legal,
at
legal thing, if we were to say that it didn't apply, are we setting up ourselves for any litigation with former developers that we required to do that for the
I
last twenty-something years?
don't know how the appeals process would play out for things that are already in motion or have already been approved.
No, but we're setting ourselves up going forward.
Yes.
No, I think it has to be addressed and
Go to
changed.
town meeting, we might not get this done by fall town meeting. It might not get passed at fall town meeting. Then we can go all the way to spring or the next fall. It does set precedent going forward, absolutely. And my other 2 cents is, personally, I never take into account if we're gonna get sued or not in any decision that we're making doing this. I just think that is bad practice in my opinion.
Yeah. But the applicant raised it themselves, so I think it's fair to at least say, this is what they said. Whether or not they do.
100%, I just don't take it into consideration of anything as what I'm considering. I don't care if they sue us, I don't care if they don't sue us. Like, I just don't consider that in any of my decisions.
Thank you. Paul, you wanted to?
Yeah, just to add that, we also have to remember too, as you know, abutters can also appeal. And they could appeal if you decided not to factor that in, they could appeal and say you should have.
So now we're in a ruts.
I think
I
we
really
move
like it.
forward with putting the recommendation that one of the,
If it's
terms
approved,
being that it has to have the affordable housing to it.
is that an official motion?
Yes.
Okay.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on that motion about including a potential condition requiring the applicant meet the affordable housing bylaw?
This is to accept the condition into the rest of it. Am I understanding right?
The motion is to include
Include.
the condition in the decision if it is approved. Okay? Is there any further discussion on the motion? Okay. Hearing none, I'll go through the roll here. Eric,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Wayne,
Yes.
Laura,
Yes.
Alan,
Yes,
and I will vote yes as well. So that condition is something that, if approved, the board would include as part of its decision.
That's applicable as special permit, right? Not the site plan.
Yes, it's a special permit condition.
Okay, good.
Yeah, because it talks about the special permit granting authority and
Yep.
all that other fun stuff. only other condition that I think that we had question about was if we wanted to look at the commercial uses and the differentiation between like a hotel and multifamily, and whether we have the definitions even to talk about it, which I'm gonna guess that we probably don't, but that's a whole other discussion.
With everything so well written, I found it hard to believe. Sorry, sarcasm comes natural.
That, as it should, no, no, it's, I know we looked at a lot of this when we were looking at the rooming house discussion in terms of the definition.
It is rooming house versus tour, and tourist are the same thing.
Right.
I don't know what hotel is.
Right. So,
I think it's just generally that hotels, tourist housing, lodging is only allowed to stay for 2 weeks, I think, like 14 days.
yeah, we also have a, like an Airbnb bylaw, which has its own set of regulations that people do need to come before the board for. So that's not something that would necessarily apply. So if we have a good, I'm not seeing, as I go through the bylaws here, a good delineation between multifamily and kind of a hotel kind of,
The state has the definition, really.
yeah.
The state defines lodging and hotels.
Well, let's go through the definitions here, just for fun. Yeah, there's nothing that's coming up for a definition of a hotel, it's just whether or not it's permitted in the individual. So, Paul, if you want to just pull up what multifamily dwelling says there, because I
Sure.
see that you have it on screen, so I'm cheating by cribbing off of your screen there. So, again, this is our definition of multifamily dwelling. A building such as an apartment house containing 3 or more dwelling units with independent cooking and sleeping facilities.
We have a definition for family, though.
But we don't necessarily say that. So it needs to be used by a family. And then the definition of the family would follow that, yes. But I don't think that that would necessarily, yeah. The applicant stated they'd be open to saying that rental terms shall be longer than 30 days. If we wanted to include that one, we certainly can. I don't
Might
think
be an
it
easy
really,
way of getting around it.
I don't think it really meets the, I don't think it would necessarily do anything to deter the state from looking at it if they wanted to. But I don't think there's anything that we can do that would necessarily do that either.
I think the state's gonna have to go looking real hard to get to that point. They're trying to limit and enforce the 9-month stay. You know what I mean? I don't think they're looking to expand right now. I think they're looking to restrict it.
Okay. So, if there's nothing we're gonna add for that condition, we can cross it off. Is there anything further that we wanted to discuss in terms of conditions or other factors related to this project prior to moving forward with a vote? Okay. So would anybody like to make a motion? I would say we would take the special permits first and the site plans second, potentially.
Motion to approve special permit number 19928 and special permit number 19935 with standard and special conditions as just discussed.
Second.
Did you do the site plan though, or the special permit?
Just special permits.
It's just special permit.
The motion was for both special permits as a unit
Okay.
with conditions, standard conditions and additional conditions as discussed, yes. And the second was Wayne, is that correct?
Yep.
Okay. Is there any further discussion on the motion? And the motion is to, in the affirmative. Okay. Hearing no additional discussion, I will go through the roll for a vote. Again, as a special permit, this requires a 5-vote supermajority. Eric?
Yes.
Jim?
No.
Steve?
No.
Wayne?
No.
Laura?
Yes.
Alan?
Yes,
And I will vote yes. That is 4-3 against, so the special permit is not granted. Would anybody like to take any additional action on the site plans themselves?
We ran into this the last time of whether we needed to.
We did.
Did we move?
We did do site plan action on Conda.
Motion to approve site plan number 20100 and 20103 with standard and special conditions as discussed.
Seconded.
Thank you, Laura, for the motion, and Eric for the second. Paul, were you gonna say something there?
Just when we're done with the vote, are we going to talk about the reasons?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second, again, to approve the site plan with conditions as discussed, as well as standard conditions. Any further discussion on that motion? Okay. Eric?
Yes.
Jim?
No.
Steve?
No.
Wayne?
No.
Laura?
Yes.
Alan?
yes.
And I will vote yes as well. That is 4-3 with the same votes. Okay. Normally, I know in other past sessions, we've had the decision and then we've come back and we've refined some of the wording around our reasons for the decision. As this is our final meeting before the election, I do want to make sure that we have that anybody who wants to has the opportunity to kind of state any of the reasons that they'd like to share for the denial at this time. We do not have to issue the decision at this point, but anything that we would like to share in terms of reasons to include on this initial draft while we are in an open session, I invite everybody to say so.
I can share mine. Twofold, mainly the abutter impact, and then two, that the town wanted this developed as village commercial. And whereas if they were to come in and build by right, that's fine, that's what the town voted on, that was their motivation and desire. This being by special permit, and I see so many abutters negatively impacted, I didn't see the good outweighing the negative.
Same. I see the impact from the abutters as the #1 reason. We haven't had anybody stand up and recommend that we do this. We've had more people recommend we don't do this, and I'm an elected representative. I gotta represent the people that stand here and tell me what to do.
But overall, is it generally?
Not socially desirable.
Okay. Any additional comments that we wanted to add at this point? We will still have the opportunity to review the decision prior to filing with the clerk. But just because of the timing as it relates to the election, I want to make sure that if there are any aspects of this denial that we want to discuss tonight, that we have the opportunity to do so.
I've got something not specific to that conditions, but I think we gotta put down in the near future to have a discussion about standards for denying a site plan review, which are completely different than denying a special permit. I just think we need to review those in the near future.
Thank you, Alan. Anything further that we wanted to add at this point for the decision?
It is, although with conservation's agreement on it, I still think it's awfully close to the wetlands. It's right up against the 25-foot marker, which is going to cause an impact.
Okay. Okay. So, Paul and Brian, we can work on the format of the decision, and I think it still makes sense to bring it back to the board in our next session, even if we have some turnover before we file it.
Okay.
Especially given the amount of time that we put into it, just to make sure that we have everything that we want in there.
Right, okay.
Okay. Other items on our agenda this evening, we did have 2 sets of minutes that we'll share. Did anybody have any specific comments, edits, updates to those that were shared? I will add, if you do not feel comfortable voting on those minutes, please say so.
I'm gonna say I didn't even read them, I didn't even see them. If you guys want to go ahead, fine, I'll abstain.
I honestly didn't see them. I check my email constantly, I didn't see them.
They were on the initial email with the agenda. Given that we have two members who did feel that they read them, I think maybe it makes sense just to put those up for our next session. Yeah. And I saw that you finally could get some help in putting some of those together.
Who's temporary?
The font changed, so it's easy. Okay. In terms of additional planning board business and policies, I do want to say that we do have an election coming up, but we do have 2 members who are not on the ballot to return with us. So I just want to say thank you to Wayne and Alan. We have certificates of appreciation for your service to the town.
Alan, I've started a write-in campaign in your honor.
Alan, I'll send this to you in the email, but I'm just kidding.
That's fine, Jim, I don't think you're the only one. But I will say, I'm not gonna leave you guys hanging, I don't know if
Meant to
anyone
sign
running.
these, and then I didn't.
If there's an open seat, I'll gladly take an appointment for a year and go with that route.
You've got my vote.
Vote for Alan.
Wayne, I wouldn't torture you like that.
Cold. Okay, so now that I've actually signed it, there we go.
There we go.
Failure on my part in that respect.
That, and I'll give you 50 cents, you might get a cup of coffee somewhere.
Not for 50 cents.
That was
That was a joke.
I will say, we had a number of applicants who thanked us all for what we do here this evening. I think it's great. Thank all of you for what you do. I will see everybody at town meeting. I'll probably see you before. Our next meeting is May 7th.
Did we want to schedule anything after? I know we're still waiting for elections, but.
Do we have applications that we need to notice?
We do.
Yes.
Okay. So we have May the 7th, and 2 weeks from that would be May the 21st, correct? That's not Memorial Day? Memorial Day's
No,
later?
Memorial Day is the Monday after.
So I would suggest that the 21st would be our next meeting, unless anybody has any conflicts or objections.
What was the date, I'm sorry?
We have May the 7th, which is our next one, and May the 21st would be the next one that we're proposing.
Yep.
And do we need to notice anything in June yet, or no? Do we need to do
Like if
another
we
one?
can schedule out, I think we should schedule out for the end of June.
Okay.
I know last year Tim wanted to wait for any new
That-
members to.
That's the
Oh,
only question.
true.
That's
Okay.
what I'm trying to manage,
Yeah,
is
sure.
just, if we have things we need to notice, and we need to have dates, then that's one thing. If we,
When's our second meeting?
the 21st.
The 21st. So we should be okay for that. Okay.
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 So we'll proceed with setting additional meeting agendas following the elections, when we have at least one new member, and we'll move forward with potential appointments after that fact, unless we get a whole lot of write-ins for somebody, so. Okay.
Might commit voter fraud, just kidding, just kidding.
Okay. Is there anything else that we wanted to discuss in tonight's open session? Okay,
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
I was gonna say, Wayne, do you wanna make the motion?
Oh, sorry, go ahead, do it. I rescind my motion.
adjourn.
Seconded.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Thank you, Wayne and Jim. Hearing no further discussion, Eric,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Wayne, Laura,
Yes.
Alan,
There was some irony in that.
and I'll vote
That was
yes.
good. No, that was good.
Okay. Thank you very much, everybody.
Alan,
Good luck.
Same.
Wayne, we'll steal. Wayne, I'll-